to the Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast, coming to you from DraftKings Studios with your hosts, Kyle Borganoni and Matthew Betz.
We're back. At least I'm back. I've got the beach bod, people. But Betz, since I was gone, it feels like you've made a new friend. You're rolling in the dough. You have a new life. Are you just going to leave me?
Honestly, I don't know if this is a causation, but there is a strong correlation in the sample size of one where when you leave for the week, good things happen for me. So if you just want to take another week, head back to the beach, kick your feet up, pour a drink, and just chill, that would be great for my bankroll. I don't know what it is about the fact that you weren't here, but I was just helping you out with a lot of the content you produce in the DFS Pass and behind the scenes and stuff. So I was just so locked in this week. I don't know what happened, but it was a great week. Definitely got a little lucky, but good week in a little bit of sports betting, good week in DFS. But very happy to have you back, man. It was kind of a weird week without you.
No, it's good to be back. I do not mind unplugging. I'm one of those people that when I go on vacation, I'm not going to check anything. And so I was gone, I think 6 days. So I don't really check anything with DFS. I mean, I'm checking a little bit in our Slack channel, but I got replaced by Andy. And I also got replaced in the sense where our listeners and people on Twitter have found a new strategy in DFS, and it's called Copy Andy Holloway. Just copy and paste what he's doing. Did you see people do that in the Millie Maker?
Yes, everyone's sending screenshots, basically just being like, Andy, here I am right with you, because their score is the exact same because they're playing the exact same lineup, which was so funny. And then on top of that, all of the responses and replies on Twitter were, oh, Andy, you should just host permanently with Betz and Borg, or you should just host with Betz, just trying to throw us to the side. We know nothing at this point. So I have nothing to say about that. It's just so fun to see Andy absolutely invested in DFS and all the guys honestly having success. So it's been a ton of fun.
I feel like I'm Obi-Wan, and I've worked with a group of young Padawans, and there was one that came up in our midst, and that's Andy Holloway. And what he does instead is he was supposed to be, the chosen one that DFS is now a thing, and now he's throwing me aside and claiming glory. But yes, do copy Andy's lineups while he's running hot right now. I did have a couple people message and see that lineup and say, wait a second, Borg and Betz, they talk all the time about correlation. Andy, you were playing your quarterback naked. And I had to explain to him, Andy, were you doing these lineups in the nude? He responded, I'm not going to tell you that information.
Oh man. Yeah, it was a weird week in general. With Andy's lineup having zero correlation being so good. This was a week where that worked because all of the quote unquote best plays weren't just good, they absolutely smashed. So it was a week where if you faded the chalk, you probably didn't have a great week outside of Justin Herbert stacks and Nick Chubb and those kind of plays. But yeah, man, the chalk, this was one of those weeks where the chalk just went off. So it was tough for tournaments, I think.
I played one GPP lineup, okay? So just one out of everything. Threw a dart in the Millie Maker, and it happened to be a Herbert Mike Williams stack with Nick Chubb. I also had Antonio Brown in it. So I had a good week in my one lineup where I more than made up where I was in cash. But let's talk about some of those plays. I write a weekly article where I get to kind of review my cash process, but you were in it. Your head was in it way more. And I actually kind of got to function as a listener. I listened to the podcast, listened to you and Andy, and then I just got to read some of the DFS Pass articles. So it was kind of nice for me just to kind of take in everything. So what were the consensus best plays? And if you didn't play this, what happened?
Yeah, it was a really clear 3 once Sunday morning got here. And this is why it's so important to be plugged into the news Sunday morning. We all thought Dalvin Cook was going to give it a go. He told the reporters all week, I'm planning to play. And that was the sentiment. So you couldn't really play either he or Alexander Mattison. And then we got news they were going to rest Dalvin Cook. And at that point, at his price tag, Alexander Mattison became the best play on the entire slate. It was 5.5K against the Lions. So you really need to be plugged in there. So he was obviously a lock at that point. And then that salary savings option allowed you to get up to one of, or both, honestly, which is what I did, of Derrick Henry, who of course was in a smash spot against the Jaguars, and then Devontae Adams was underpriced against the Bengals, and we had talked about that on the show. Andy and I did. So those were the 3 guys, and I would just let people know that if you aren't playing, this week specifically, it was so clear that if you didn't play, I would say at least 2 of those guys really think about your process, kind of go back to the drawing board and kind of reconsider maybe where your strategy was and kind of where you were leaning, because it was so clear and obvious that those had to be in a cash game lineup for you to have a good week, and those guys all smashed.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to have Antonio Brown, which had very similar production to Devontae Adams, where I kind of got to eke my way. But you probably noticed if you're playing head-to-heads or if you're playing 50-50s this week, the cash line was moved way up. I mean, it was around 165 in a lot of those contests. But for me, I had a couple of those contests where I actually finished 0.3 behind the cash line because of Kyler kneel downs. And part of that was just I had Kyler in my lineup on Tuesday, just said, I'm not going to move off it. I have Devontae Adams in my home league, so I'll be fine. But for me, it was a fine week for not being plugged in and just kind of functioning as a listener and someone that just enjoys the show. So please make sure that you stay with us throughout the week. I think that's a huge part of it. If you get the DFS pass, you get DFS pass alerts. And one of those things was Betz actually alerting me saying, hey, by the way, Dalvin Cook is out. So while I was driving back home was when I got the message and I got to pivot my lineup and include Alexander Mattison. So yes, Sunday morning is a huge part of the process as well. But I wanted to stop and read one of our listeners who gave an awesome review. And last week, I said, right before I left on vacation, I said, hey, we'd love to get some new listener reviews. We were overwhelmed by you guys. Just some of your kind words and the things that you've said about this podcast, the way that you've learned, the way that you've kind of even just build your bankroll from nothing. I had someone that said, hey, I started with $10 and now I'm at 500. So any quick things before I read this review, Betz? Anything about those that stood out to you?
No, like you said, definitely way more than I think we were both expecting, and the kind words and stuff like that and support really does mean a lot to not just us, but our brand as well with Andy, Mike, and Jason. So thank you all to everyone that did review, and if you've already given us a review and done that in the past, thank you for that as well. It's been a fun year so far, man. I hope it continues with our listeners. It's just been a great year to start.
And don't forget, we go all the way through the playoffs. So, I mean, playoff DFS is a different kind of animal and super fun. So we will be 2 shows a week all the way through the season and through the playoffs. But I'm going to read this review. This is the one we picked. We had a lot of different reviews. So this one's from Rachel Anner. So Rachel Anner, if you want to DM myself or Betz on Twitter, we chose yours because you said this is a literal game changer. This show is amazing. 5 stars. I am pretty new to DFS, and since marrying my husband, I have gotten really into football in general. This show has gotten me to cash 3 out of the last 4 weeks, which is better than my husband. And I have a way better understanding of strategy, and I love the rapport between the hosts. I listen every week, and I won't put a lineup in without it. If you're hoping to get better at DFS and you want to start killing it, start making money by listening to the Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast. So, Betz, she's bankrolling her husband. I mean, he's going to have to quit his job soon.
Yeah, there's probably nothing better in this world than just being able to talk a little trash to the ones that you love most. So, yes, this is awesome. Thank you for the review. Fantastic. Yes, DM us on Twitter. Kyle, hit her with your handle so she knows where to get her free swag.
I'm at Kyle_Borg and Betz is at the Fantasy PT. So if you guys want to connect with us, feel free to do that on Twitter and on our Discord channel. If you are a Foot Clan member, we'd love to be a part of that. But let's preview the Week 6 slate.
State of the main slate.
So we're going to talk about the games in Week 6, and in just a second, I'll kind of preview. This is different. There's actually a different strategy you have to employ this week because we have teams on bye and whatnot. So reminder, each week we will be referencing the DraftKings Sportsbook line. It's where Betz and I play. You can go to sportsbook.draftkings.com and let's check in with a wager from this past week. Give me 1 up and 1 down.
Yeah, dude. How about our boy, Big Mike Willie? We put this wager in after the second week, I believe it was, where you and I were like, is this real? Like, is Mike Williams actually going to be a consistent fantasy star? Which, by the way, for those of you that haven't been following me for a while, I absolutely love Mike Williams and have lost far too much money on him. So this feels good to hopefully get even. Mike Williams, we bet him to lead the league in touchdown receptions a couple of weeks ago. He hung another 2 on the board this week against Cleveland, so that's looking really good. The odds have shifted. I think we got it at, was it plus 1,800? And it's now at plus 800, I believe. So we're seeing...
And now he's the favorite, right?
Yeah, he's the favorite right now. So I think his role is here to stay. I do think touchdown regression probably comes for a little bit for him sometime soon, but as far as his targets and role, looks really good. And then the one that is not going well, this football team from Washington. My goodness, what is happening? I was very bullish on their over 8 wins, just hoping to, hey, let's at least get a push at this point. It has been awful. Now they get the Chiefs as 7-point underdogs coming off of a loss. That's not looking great. I'm going to go ahead and just say that money is down the toilet.
For me, I'll just say the one that's down the toilet, and I have a lot of money riding on George Kittle, but I have an over. It's basically right over 1,000 receiving yards, which per game, he's basically been that player in his career, but I'm just going to say that one's gone after he went on IR. And luckily, checking in on my best ball teams, like I was way overweight on Kittle, but I was also overweight on Mark Andrews. So after this week, I still have some teams that are in the running, and I feel pretty good about some of the best ball like strategies that we employed this summer. So it's not a total loss, but Kittle over 1,000 receiving yards is not good. But one that I feel great about is, I think it was early May, I got the Chargers to make the playoffs at plus money, which just feels great right now. They're 4-1, leading that division, and I just feel like the Chargers are set up for the rest of the season, and they also have an easier schedule than you would think. They've won their tough games. So this week is Baltimore, which is tough, but it eases up a little bit later. But Chargers to make the playoffs, I feel great about that one. But hit me with the games over 50 this week.
Yeah, we got 4 on the board this week. Kansas City going on the road to Washington. That is a 55.5 point total with Kansas City. The line is now -7. The Chargers on the road at Baltimore as underdogs, 3.5 points. I'm shocked by that. 51 total. Arizona on the road at Cleveland. Cleveland -2.5, 51 points. And then Dallas going to New England, with New England being 4.5 point dogs, 50 point total there.
So off the main slate this week, normally we always talk about the Thursday night game, Sunday night game, Monday night game. We have another London game. So off the slate this week is Tampa Bay and Philadelphia. It's the Battle of Miami in London, Jacksonville and Miami. And Seattle, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, Tennessee. So we have like a lot of teams that are off the main slate. And then we have 4 teams that are on bye: Atlanta, New Orleans, the Jets, and the 49ers. So my question for us, just kind of open up this conversation about the slate, is how does this change our strategy? Our pool of teams, we have 10 games on the main slate. That's it. Like compared to the first 4 weeks, we had 13 games. Last week we had 12 because of the London game, but only 10 games on this slate. How does that change our strategy?
Yeah, it's just a travesty. I was just so excited to play Geno Smith this week, and it's just taken away from me. So no Geno for us. But in all honesty, it does change a lot because normally early in the season when every team is playing on the main slate, or at least the ones that aren't on Thursday and Monday and Sunday, of course, there's just so many games and so many players. Like when you scroll through the player pool, there is what seems like endless options. So it's very easy to find spots to pick and choose that I think the field is going to overlook. When the slate gets smaller and the number of teams playing gets smaller, our player pool obviously will shrink. And as a result, it might be a little harder to find those spots to attack in tournaments. I think we'll probably see a little bit more groupthink because, again, it's so obvious who the best plays are when the player pool gets smaller. So I think being more creative in lineup building this week is going to be a little bit more crucial to have some success in tournaments.
Yeah, for the first couple of weeks, you think about it, like there is room for error. Like you can see Millie Maker winning lineups and they have like 4 points at their tight end spot. And you might look at that and be like, hey, what the heck? How did this person win? There's room for error when there's a plethora of players, but in big tournaments, you're going to have to hit the nuts because there's so much fewer options that you need to do that. So thus far, the chalk has been super strong and even strong in GPPs. Like that's, I think what's been my biggest takeaway is when I look at these GPP winning lineups, they had Alexander Madison in there, which was just the chalkiest of chalk plays, but he was a great play. We said that in cash. Same thing with Derrick Henry. Like those were very easy plays. Devontae Adams, like those were very easy plays to come to, but this is a great week to get different. So in our roster percentage report, my favorite thing to do is to look at running backs and then kind of scroll down and say, okay, well, who's kind of in that next tier, that second or third tier? This past week, it was what led me to Nick Chubb. As I said, okay, Nick Chubb is like 4% rostered in some of our projections. I think he ended up coming more like 6%, but it led me to say, okay, Justin Herbert, I think is a great play this week. Nick Chubb is going to be low rostered. And then Mike Williams, we know his big play potential, but he was also down there. So that's how you kind of construct a lineup in GPPs. But what about for cash? Is there any difference this week for you?
Yeah, in general, usually what we see is when the size of the slate gets smaller, the cash line becomes lower. And again, it's because we don't have as access to as many good plays as we normally do. And so, it's sometimes this is the week where you're like, sweet, I got 3 points from my punt tight end. Like, that's fine kind of thing. So you will see a lower cash line in general. I highly doubt we see a week like we had last week where cash lineups are putting out 200 points, it felt like. So I doubt we see that this week, and I expect it to come down in the future, especially with more bye weeks around the horizon.
Yeah, so just remember, this past week, the cash line was 165, 170, and a lot of double ups. And the week before, it was in the 120s. So that's what's going to happen is you're going to see variance week to week, and then with a smaller pool of teams, just expect it. I'm expecting it to be 120-ish once again. So we'll talk about some of our strongest plays, but just hint, Derrick Henry is not on this slate, so you can't just lock in Derrick Henry. I feel like for the last couple of weeks, that's what we've said is just put in the big dog, but it's going to be different. But what is one of your favorite games to stack, or at least what do you think is going to be one of the more popular games?
Yeah, I immediately logged in to put down the game that you're going to talk about, so I'll let you take that one. But I'm going to talk about the Chargers and the Ravens. What Justin Herbert and the Chargers are doing right now is incredible. It's hard to see them having a game against a Ravens defense who we literally just saw last night make Carson Wentz look like an MVP candidate. The Ravens are struggling. They're banged up in the secondary as they were with preseason injuries. They are blitzing a ton, and Justin Herbert has been awesome against the blitz, so I think he'll have success here. Then the other side of the football, like we know what the Chargers want to do, which is take away deep plays and deep passing. Well, that sets up perfectly for Lamar to be able to scramble and run, Mark Andrews to eat underneath. Marquise Brown has a new role this year. Like, there's just so much to like about this game that I think it'll be popular, and it's got a really high total with two teams that people like to play.
Yeah, I think those teams complement each other really well, where what the Chargers are good at is downfield passing, and then what the Ravens are really good at is running the ball, and the Chargers are just a run funnel defense. So there's just that game's set up, and we'll talk about some of those individual matchups. But yes, love that game. And then the highest total of the week is Kansas City, Washington. It's going to be a popular game. Mahomes coming off a loss. I mean, there's a narrative there. But the other narrative at play is the fact that Kansas City's defense, would you call them the worst in the league? I mean, the Jaguars probably need to be there. The Lions are part of that group. The Colts got destroyed on Monday night. But what do you think? Bottom five?
I mean, statistically, they are. They're dead last in scoring allowed to opposing offenses. There's not much to say. They've been atrocious. And on the other side of the ball, Washington is 31st in opposing scoring allowed to offenses that they face. So this sets up, I don't think the total is high enough. It's 55 and a half. I think it could get into the 60s easily. So I do think it's going to be really popular.
Yeah, the big question is Taylor Heineke, and last week he put up an absolute dud, but he was fun for fantasy the first couple of weeks. I did look up this stat, okay? So this is a hot stat. Just put it out there. So I asked the question, how bad is Kansas City's defense? Well, the Chiefs are allowing a first down on 43.4% of their opponent's pass attempts, okay? That's really bad. That's really, really bad. But for context, Patrick Mahomes is gaining a first down on 43.1% of his pass attempts, best in the NFL. So essentially, what am I saying here, Betz?
I'm not sure, to be honest.
I'm basically saying that the Chiefs, it's like the Chiefs are facing Mahomes every single game.
I saw that on Twitter, and I was like, I hope he doesn't ask me about this, because I'm not even sure what your stat is saying here.
What I'm trying to say is that the Chiefs defense has been so bad on per pass attempt basis. It's like they're facing Mahomes, like across the field. Like that's what they're giving up. And obviously it's not the same, but that's what they're turning opposing quarterbacks into. And if you can get Taylor Heineke, which we'll talk about, like in the 5K range, like he's 5'8" right now, I just think that game, there's so many pieces that are cheap on the Washington side, and then we obviously have to pay up on the Kansas City side. So I don't know. I'm interested in that game. Obviously, people will be all over it with a huge total, biggest on the slate, but that's going to be probably the two most popular games we just mentioned. But give me a sneaky game this week.
Yes, I will take the Bengals and the Lions. And last week, I was pretty high on Joe Burrow's stacks in tournaments because of the trend that we were seeing where, slowly we were seeing a little bit more pass volume from the Bengals. And I know that the rhetoric out there is, well, they're just such a run-heavy team. Joe Burrow now coming off season highs in passing attempts and dropbacks and taking on the Lions. And last week, Justin Jefferson was a guy I was really high on as well. And it's because the secondary is just awful. So, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, all those guys are in play this week. And then it's so easy to bring it back on the other side because we just know, Swift is usually a great play and TJ Hawkinson is due for a big game sooner or later. And there's some cheap options at the wide receiver position for the Lions as well that could open up value too. So I like that game quite a bit. I don't think people are going to play it too much.
We've talked about the Lions way more on this podcast than I thought we would this season, but they've been in some interesting games. They've had some fight. They've also had some bad luck, right, against the Ravens and Vikings the last 2 weeks. So I think that's interesting. And then I'll throw it to those Vikings you mentioned. Vikings and Panthers is a sneaky game. We've talked about the Panthers a lot in terms of DJ Moore. I love him this week. He's got a great price. CMC, do we have any information? Do you have any lean about CMC this week? I know they held him out this past week. I feel like they're not going to run him out there unless he's good to go.
Yeah, and he's been pushing to play. He wanted to play last week, and they basically forced him to sit one more week. And they just deactivated someone or dropped someone down to the practice squad, a running back who they had elevated previously. So it looks like that is all telling us that CMC is going to be back, and he's underpriced this week. So I definitely want some of that. I think he's 8.8K?
Yeah, 8.8. That's way too cheap for CMC. We know when he plays, he's top 5 back, at least in DFS, per week. He's awesome. Justin Jefferson, I want to play him almost every single week. He's awesome. So that's a sneaky game. What game do you think you want to be underweight on or maybe potentially fade?
Yeah, not interested this week in the Raiders taking on the Broncos. It's a game that sits there and it's got an okay total at 45, but then you think about the Broncos just playing so slow. They're kind of void of pass catching options. And, on the Raiders side, with all that's going on in the headlines with John Gruden, what are they bringing to the table this week? I have no idea, but it's just a spot I'm not looking towards. Probably pass on all the options there in those games.
Yeah, other than Waller, I'm not really interested in that game at all. I'll go with the Rams at the Giants. The Rams have a healthy team implied total of 29, but it just doesn't feel like a game that's stackable unless you want to roll with Mike Glennon. And I don't think you're feeling very safe, Betz, are you? If you do that?
That is not a safe move for work. No, do not do that. It was so funny. As soon as he got in the game, our mentions just started blowing up. People being like, Mike Glennon sighting, here he is. Do not play Mike Glennon this week. He is likely to be throwing to, I don't even know who's playing wide receiver for them. Evan Ingram and who knows?
Colin Johnson?
Yeah. No, thank you. No, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just hard because even though the Rams have a great total, I do like Darrell Henderson's price, but then do you pay up for Kupp? I just don't see the game flow of that being one that says the Giants are going to be able to keep up. So if you want to do an onslaught stack, I think it would come in lower rostered, but that's just not where I want to go this week. But which team do you feel confident hits their over of their team implied total?
Yeah, I'll take the Chargers. Like I talked about, their offense is just humming. We have Brandon Staley just talking all about analytics, and everyone in the fantasy community loves him, gets you hot and bothered. But their team total is low. It's 24.3. I'm shocked that they are underdogs to the Ravens, especially after what we just saw last night. So this is a spot I really want to attack. I think they can easily fly over their total.
Do you feel like the Ravens have been the luckiest team in the league so far?
Yeah, I do. But at the same time, the coaching staff is awesome, and they're a heavy analytics team too, right? So I think when they had all their injuries, everyone was like, oh, this is going to be a train wreck. So I do think they had a little bit of the right side of variance, but at the same time, I think their game plan and everything like that has set them up to succeed for sure.
I know this is kind of a football guys talk, but I just appreciate that when their running backs went down, they actually did have to change some of their identity and let Lamar make mistakes, just create and unleash Hollywood Brown, who feels like he should have 12 touchdowns already. So I don't know. I like that the Ravens didn't just get their, they didn't stay stuck in the mud of saying, we're the Ravens, we're just going to run the ball with Devonta Freeman over and over and over again to the line. So, and Latavius looks done. He did not look good on Monday night at all.
No, it was not pretty. Also not pretty. Where's the ball for Tyson Williams? He's easily the best back on the roster. I do not understand.
I'm going to say the Chiefs. I know their team implied total is super high at 31, but that just doesn't feel like enough for Mahomes against Washington. I feel like that game like we mentioned, that 55 total doesn't feel like enough. So I will take Kansas City, and I want exposure to Mahomes, Kelsey, and Hill this week. I'm interested. All right, which team are you staying away from that you think is going to hit the under?
It's hard to see our boy Mikey G, Mike Lennon, coming out and sticking 19 points on the board this week against the Rams. Again, who is playing for the Giants? Saquon is out. Kenny Golladay is probably out. We don't know about Shepard or Darius Slayton, who missed the last 2 games with a hamstring issue. Kadarius Toney might be suspended or hurt or both after throwing a punch and injuring his ankle this past week. So it's rough, man. I can't see them putting up almost 20 points against the Rams. I'll take the under there.
I might eat my words here, but the Bears might be a team I just don't play the entire year. Like, I just don't play any players from their team. Darnell Mooney's like the only one that's semi-interesting, but the game only has a 45 total. I just don't love their prospects of getting 19.5 points against the Packers. This is not a good team, and yet they're in a position where they're actually kind of competitive in that division. I don't know how, and they just beat the Raiders, but yeah, I don't want any Bears. Like, Justin Fields has not proven that he's going to be able to be good for fantasy. Damian Williams was a great 1-week play. And then, I mean, what happened to Allen Robinson? Is there any chance that you would even think about playing him, even at like 2% roster percentage?
I mean, that was the story last week. We got a question on the show that was like, hey, Allen Robinson, 5.5K this week. No one's going to play him. What do you think? And I was like, I can't tell you anything. Like, I have nothing positive to say about this other than the fact that we know he's going to be 2% rostered. So if you want to trust the talent and just keep taking a shot on him in a lineup here or there until it happens, fine. But there's nothing that we've seen, especially from not only like the tape, but actually like looking at his box scores and his target share and stuff like that. Like, it's not working. So the dog does not love that. It's not working. So I'm not sure how you can even talk yourself into it at this point. It's just, it looks scary, honestly.
All right, let's talk about the salary standouts for this week.
Salary standouts.
You need to give your dog a shout out because it makes a lot more appearance than people realize.
He does, and he always like jumps off the bed next to me and like shakes his ears. It's so loud, and we have the talk every week. I'm like, all right, buddy, I need you to be quiet for like 45 minutes. Can you do that? The answer is no.
All right, this week, there is no Brady, no Hurts, no Josh Allen, and no Geno Smith, which, like we said earlier, changes your opinion. But who are the salary standouts at quarterback?
Yeah, I talked about these guys both already. We'll just bring them back up. Justin Herbert looks like a great spot here, 7.3K, taking on Baltimore. And then also throw out Joe Burrow. Again, looking at what he is doing in the trend for the Bengals passing offense has been great. So I want to hop on there. Taking on the Lions, obviously a really good matchup, and the price at 6.3K is pretty good as well.
So Mahomes is 8.3 against Washington, and Lamar Jackson is underpriced basically from what he did Monday night. So only 7.4K in that same matchup. Cheaper guys this week, I like Mac Jones if you're really going really far down there at 5.2. And then Taylor Heineke we mentioned as well. So at quarterback this week, it just depends on where you want to stack. And if you want to stack in cash, I don't mind that. But Justin Herbert just feels so safe right now. Like 300 yards feels like a floor. And that's what you want. So he's good on FanDuel as well at 8K. I think those are probably the stronger plays. But we'll get into later in the week who we like in terms of stacking and whatnot. But at running back, there's no Derrick Henry, no Najee Harris, no Alvin Kamara. So who do you like this week?
Yeah, I'll throw out 2 guys that I think people were really high on redraft, and we haven't really seen a lot from them recently, except for last night for this guy, Jonathan Taylor. Was awesome, 6.6K, taking on Houston. The hope here is that they just get into a positive game script and let him just go to town. And there's also some rumors early in the week out there that teams have inquired about trading for Marlon Mack, so if they either healthy scratch him or sit him this week, it should be the Jonathan Taylor show. And then also throw out Joe Mixon. He was less than 100% last week. He split the work with Samaje Perine. Our boy Samaje, though, on the COVID-19 list this week, so not sure what's going to happen there. If he's out, obviously Mixon would look a lot stronger. Again, taking on the Lions, not a scary matchup.
Yes, I like that price tag. I like the matchup. Right now, when I was first assembling my cash lineup, Mixon was in there. So like that call. CMC, if he's healthy, like if you got the news on Friday that CMC is going to play, are you putting him in your cash lineup, 8.8?
100%. Yeah, it's just too cheap, right? We like the last 2 years, he's been like 10K when he's been healthy. So I would love to play him there before he gets north of 9, which he certainly will next week.
All right, Darrell Henderson, 6K against the Giants. They're heavy 10.5 point favorites, so like that there. And then in Kansas City, Darrell Williams is 4.9K. He's going to get the workload. I looked up this stat. Every single time in his career, he's had at least 12 opportunities. He's had 13 fantasy points or more. So I think there's a safe floor. If you wanted to punt this week and get a cheap running back, like that's the running back to go for right now. But are you interested at all?
I think potentially, especially looking at him as a leverage play in tournaments, we don't know what the roster percentages are going to be this early in the week, but if he's a guy that's going to go under the radar because everyone wants to play the passing attack for the Chiefs, he could be an interesting leverage play, but early in the week, I'm not super drawn to him. It just kind of depends on what the roster percentage says.
I think Jerick McKinnon gets pegged as the passing downs guy, but this past week, Williams actually ran more pass routes, so I think they're going to split. I think it's going to be more like a 60-40 kind of split. So I think he's interesting at 4.9. On FanDuel, I'll throw out a couple. Antonio Gibson on the other side of the ball, 6.7. That's way too cheap against the Kansas City defense that just bleeds running back points. Chase Edmonds is 5.9. I feel like he's kind of been forgotten and the game script didn't really go his way, but I could totally see him being in a spot where Arizona is trailing at Cleveland and he gets, 5-6 targets and gets into the end zone. So I like Chase Edmonds at 5.9. And then, Latavius Murray is 5.8. That's pretty cheap on FanDuel for a starting running back on a team that wants to run the ball, but he's slow. Like, he's just really slow.
Yeah, I don't really know what to say. The only thing is the Chargers are a run funnel defense. So presumably the Ravens should have some success here. But I guess my concern is just if Herbert comes out and smashes as he's done every week, like, do they get in a negative game script as we saw last night? And then from that point on, like, Latavius is basically done. Yeah,
he's a FanDuel only play, and he's 5.8 is just a cheapie one to throw out there. Okay, wide receiver, Devontae Adams is priced up, as he should be, on DraftKings. He's 9K this week. So the reason why he was such a great play this past week is because points per dollar, he was an awesome projection, and he's still an awesome projection this week. But do you feel like 9K is like a kind of a dividing line of like, okay, what do I do?
Yeah, probably on this slate, you're choosing, do you play McCaffrey in cash games or is it Devontae Adams? Which one do you want to go with? And certainly both are awesome plays looking early in the week. My lean, though, is with McCaffrey. Whenever a player skyrockets in price, I tend to try to not just keep following that, especially coming off, 200 yards and just like a 40% target share, which he's capable of, obviously, but that should regress a little bit. So I don't want to keep paying up and try to chase that. Now, I will say on FanDuel, it's very affordable to get Devontae Adams this week if you want him. He's priced as the wide receiver 2 over there instead of the wide receiver 1 as he is on DraftKings.
That's probably what I'm going to end up doing. And I know all of us do this, where we make ourselves feel better because I have Devontae Adams in my redraft leagues, my main ones, but I'll probably play him on FanDuel and play CMC on DraftKings if he's there and just say, hey, I'll be happy regardless. DJ Moore is 7.3 on DK. I think he's an awesome play this week against a Minnesota secondary that you and I have picked on a lot this entire year. Adam Thielen on the other side of the ball is way down there. I feel like his price is just keeps plummeting, and that's usually the players that I want to play in GPPs. Like if Adam Thielen is getting less and less popular, people are forgetting he still has the same number of snaps. He's running the routes, but at 5.8K, that's stupid cheap. Jacoby Myers is a cheap PPR play. I feel like he's set up just to get, 7-8 targets, and maybe he'll score his first touchdown, and we'll be so proud of him, like a child coming home and with an award.
That's a weird analogy. I was just so sad for Jacoby last week, and popping in the metric of tackled at the 1. Like, this dude has never scored a touchdown down at the 1 yard line. They threw a quick hitter to him on the perimeter, and he gets tackled at the 1. Like, come on, man, this has to be the week against the Cowboys.
A 5.5 is great for cash. Like, I don't really love him in GPPs. I kind of like Aguilar if you're going to pick up Patriots wide receiver, but 5.5, like, I feel like he's going to do his job. So there's that. And then can I throw out one more?
Yeah, go for it.
This is just, what I want to throw out there. and you can fight me about it. But Adam Humphries, the great Adam Humphries, I leave for a week, and I come back touting Adam Humphries at 3.4K against Kansas City. Am I crazy?
I don't know. I can't actually see myself in good conscience, like sitting there on Sunday morning being like, who do I want to try to win money with this week? Yep, there he is, Adam Humphries. But like you said, he's so cheap. Curtis Samuel has now aggravated the same groin injury from June. I think there's a chance he ends up on IR or misses a ton of time. And then Logan Thomas is on IR. Curtis does need a new groin. Logan Thomas is on IR. Like, it makes sense. And we just talked about it. This game has a high total. Kansas City's defense is atrocious. Maybe I could do it. We'll see. I don't want to make a decision right now, but it is definitely in play.
I'm just trying to like plant this in your brain so that over the weekend, you'll see that this is a potentially okay play to maybe get you 10 points in cash.
Right. That's all you really need him to do, honestly.
Right. 3.4K. He's getting 65+% of the snaps this year. And I think that only goes up if Curtis Samuel is out. So there's a better Washington wide receiver, though, this week.
Yes, let's play Terry McLaurin instead because he is a stud. He is 7.1K. Again, taking on the Chiefs, high total, bad secondary. Yes, please. And then I'm going to declare this early in the week. It is officially Keenan Allen week here on the podcast. He dropped by $100 on DraftKings, 6.4K, taking on the Ravens. And their slot corner is getting destroyed this year. Keenan Allen, one of the best route runners in the game, if not the best, some would say. He's awesome, and he's going to dominate against their slot corner. So love him this week. Yes, please on Keenan Allen. And then how about your boy Pity City, dude? Michael Pittman on Monday Night Football having a breakout game, finally. And he gets the Monday Night Football discount of 5.5K here against the Texans. So I love that. And then the other punt option I'll throw out this week that looks like it could be viable is Amon-Ra St. Brown, 4.2K, taking on the Bengals. And really the rationale is, Quintus Cephas is now going to be out for quite a while after fracturing his collarbone. And Amon-Ra has been doing a lot of work in the slot. We have attacked Mike Hilton weekly on the show and in the DFS Pass, the slot corner for the Bengals. He's been awful. So Amon-Ra should see a lot of him in coverage, which I like at his price tag.
These are some of my favorite players in the league. Keenan Allen, Michael Pittman. Like this is setting up well for the brand. So we mentioned Devontae Adams on FanDuel. Michael Pittman's a great play on there at 5.8. Jacoby Myers also 5.8. So there's some cheap plays. But once again, on FanDuel, the pricing is a little bit softer. But in the DFS Pass, we have first look pricing where I get to share some of my favorite specific plays. So make sure you check that out. And then tight end this week. Tight end is bananas because Travis Kelce is only 7,000, which they priced him down. And I think someone at DraftKings just forgot to do their job. Like I'd hope that there is one person at DraftKings that their sole job is just to look after Travis Kelce. And they didn't do it this past week. So 7K is way too cheap for a player this good, for a wide receiver. And then speaking of Monday night discounts, Mark Andrews is 5.2K. And after the week he just had, is he going to be the most popular player on the slate?
At his price, it's possible. I also think at his price, Travis Kelce could easily be the smash spot that you just lock into your lineup because that's the cheapest he's been in forever. And he's in a great spot against Washington, as we've said multiple times. So this is the week, and I make fun of Kyle sometimes when he sends me his lineup with two tight ends in it. I always go, double tight ends, huh? But this is probably the week where it is really viable because let's be honest, Travis Kelce is not a tight end. He's usually a wide receiver. So if you want to flex Kelce and play Mark Andrews, I think it's totally fine. Or play Kelce as a flex and then also throw in one of these cheap punts that we'll talk about. I think this week in particular, it's totally viable.
So the four tight ends we like the most are all in the same games. I thought that was interesting. Like Kelce at 7K versus Washington. And then on the other side, RSJ, Ricky Seals-Jones, who did his job as our punt tight end this past week, is only 3K. He's out in the field a ton. He had 99% of the snaps this past week. So he has that Logan Thomas role. So those two tight ends are in the same game. And then your boy Mark Andrews and Jared Cook is only 3.2, and they're in the same game. So do you feel like if you're going to do double tight end, like you can't have two in the same game, or is that just a hard rule that we don't need to follow?
So my initial lean is that if I'm going to do it, it's going to be with Kelce and Mark Andrews or RSJ and Mark Andrews or something like that. So I think it's viable. Again, those guys are just so cheap, like Ricky Seals-Jones and Jared Cook, that we don't really care as much about correlating for ceiling in this type of situation. You're just looking at these, punt tight ends, like who's running routes, who's getting targets, and both these guys fit the bill.
I think Jared Cook would be an interesting GPP play off of Andrews, just because he's going to be popular, and you're going to stack that way with Herbert and Cook and let's say Keenan Allen that way, and then run it back with somebody else like Hollywood. Like, I think there's just paths to stack that game, and Cook is an interesting one. And then Darren Waller is still too cheap on FanDuel. He had his 2 biggest games the last couple of years at Denver when they played, and this game's at Denver. So I think it's interesting as a play that says, hey, everyone's going to love Andrews and Kittle and Kelsey this week. Man, I still want to talk about George Kittle. It's sad. I still want him to be a thing. So I think Waller's a great play on FanDuel at 7K. Andrews is a great play at 6.3. And then I'll also mention Hunter Henry, 5.6K in that game of the Patriots and the Cowboys. I think he's viable if you wanted to go further down. And then finish this off with defense.
Yeah, over on DraftKings, I think the Chargers are in play at 2.5K. And mostly the play here is that the Ravens have been a little bit struggling with pass protection recently, so they're a nice cheap option. And then you also threw out here for punts, like Detroit, 2.1K, Houston, 2.2K. You're really just saying, if I'm going to go down that far, like I want 5 or 6 points, and most of the time in DraftKings scoring, they can get you there. So they're also viable in cash. But what about if you're looking to pay up? Like, what spots are you looking at?
So the Rams are just really hard to get to. Like, the Rams are 4.7, and they have a great matchup if it's Daniel Jones, Mike Glennon, it doesn't matter. We love, obviously, the Rams defense, but 4.7K, and then there's a huge gap. And then the Broncos are the next team at 3.9. So I just can't imagine, other than in a GPP, paying up for the Rams. They're 5K on FanDuel. Like, those are just way too expensive options. I don't mind Carolina at home against Kirk Cousins at 2.9. I feel like that's that middle tier if you have some savings, but where are you leaning? Are you going to go with maybe Chargers or punt?
Probably. I do like your call with Carolina. They've got a sneaky good pass rush for sure, so that's could create some havoc for Kirk Cousins. And we've seen him, like, when Kirk is uncomfortable, it goes south real quick. So that's a nice call there. I will say, in regards to the Rams, like, FanDuel's pricing is just so silly that if you did actually really want to play them, like, your lineup wouldn't be tanked as a result. I'm not playing them on DraftKings, that's for sure, but I think on FanDuel you can get to them if you really want them.
Yeah, and we're saying they're a good defense. They're going to score a lot of points, but they're kind of cost prohibitive. If I did do it, it would be in a GPP just to get really weird and make sure that my lineup construction is different from everyone else. But generally speaking, let's punt our defenses, get us 5 points, we're fine. If you want to play with us, once again, go to ballersdfs.com. Enter our DraftKings league. I will get to open more of those this week if some of you guys are like, hey, where are all the leagues this past week? Sorry, I was on vacation. I did have a listener, though, that showed me their winning lineup and said, hey, I just copied Andy's lineup and won the thing. So I guess you can stay tuned to the Friday Footballers episode, watch that segment, and just copy and paste Andy's lineup. Is that what you're going to do, Betz?
I mean, at this point, might as well, right? Let's just hop on board.
The process and the results basically say do what Andy does, although he's going to start hitting some variants as well. But yeah, we're excited to get back into another week and excited to just be back in the swing of things with you guys.
Absolutely, man. It's good to have you back. I think the listeners missed you. But we'll be back on Friday after a week of prep. We'll see you guys then. Have a great week.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast. Don't forget to visit us on the web at www.thefantasyfootballers.com.